Hi, I'm Phil and I'm on a grey gap year, and thanks to your support we've reached 1,000 subscribers, and I can't thank you enough. I am so very touched that you've supported me like this. Every single like, every comment, and of course every subscribe has meant so much to me, so thank you. I didn't have a bottle of champagne to hand, so I celebrated with a bottle of beer. It's one of my favourites and quite hard to get hold of these days. It's called Captain Smith's. Come on, you didn't really think I was going to waste Captain Smith's, did you? Cheers everyone, thank you so much. As this is a happy celebration video for you, my supporters, I thought I'd do something a bit different, and I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to tell you a bit more about me, and I'm going to answer the personal questions that have been asked in the comments, and I'm going to tell you where I've been recently, and I'll also tell you where I'm going next. And then I'll tell you about the trip that gave me the travel bug in the first place, and I've dug out some old photos. Then as a Brucey bonus, I'll throw open the comments section in an ask me almost anything style. So if you've got a question that you'd like to ask me in the comments, I'll endeavour to answer it if it isn't too personal or just plain rude. So I'm 50 years old and I'm single. I've got 1 daughter and 2 sons, and I've also got 4 wonderful grandchildren. My daughter's settled in Australia, so I've got grandchildren in the UK and in Australia, and this presents both challenges and opportunities. I've always loved travelling, and when I was younger I used to go cycling with my dad, and me and my dad, we went on 3 epic cycling trips. From our home in Stafford we went to Dublin, we cycled to Paris, and we cycled all the way over to Copenhagen, and all of that was before I was 16. Although I didn't do the traditional gap year because I went straight from school into working in kitchens, but I did save up and I did the working holiday thing in Australia in my early 20s. Full disclosure, there was a girl I was trying to impress and she was doing it, and this planted the seed for me. So I spent a year in Australia. I started in Adelaide, I went west to Perth, and I worked there for 3 months in a little town called Mora. It was about an hour north of Perth, and that job pretty much funded the rest of my trip. From Perth, I travelled up the west coast, camping on deserted beaches. I stopped at a place called Coral Bay. I had a couple of nights in what's now called the Karijini National Park, and I stayed in Whitnoon, which is an old asbestos mining town. It's got hazard signs everywhere and it's mostly abandoned. Fun fact, Rolf Harris worked there. I carried on along the coast to Broome, where the camels walk on the beach, and I worked picking butternut squash a bit further north in Kununurra. Now that was back-breaking work. But in Kununurra I did do a 3-day canoeing trip, which was amazing. I travelled on to Darwin and spent a few days exploring Kakadu National Park, which is where they filmed the movie Crocodile Dundee. And it's a bit odd because you'd follow the trail and then suddenly you get this deja vu moment because you'd realise that it's in the movie. And you'd be thinking, oh, is this the beach where they sat there and he said, you can live on it, but it tastes like shit. And then he gets a can of beans out. And this photo that I'm showing you now, that is the beach where they filmed that scene. From Darwin I went across the east coast and up to Cape Tribulation with the world's oldest rainforest. Not that I know how they know that. And I did a few days learning to dive on the Great Barrier Reef. And then I went down the east coast to Brisbane and then to Surfers Paradise on the Gold Coast, which once you've travelled the west coast of Australia, they feel really commercial, built up, not particularly beautiful, and definitely not a paradise. And then down to Sydney, where I spent a few weeks working at a restaurant in Neilson Park on Sharks Bay, and I did that work to pay for my ticket home. And that ticket home took me on a 4-week tour to New Zealand. I hiked, I drank, I had an amazing time. And next was a very rustic couple of weeks in Fiji. These are literally straw huts. It was truly beautiful, but I don't think I could do a hotel like that now. And from Fiji I went to Hawaii, and in Hawaii I hiked Diamond Head, I snorkeled off Hanauma Beach, but mostly I spent my nights in a bar called Moose McGillicuddy's, which I was very surprised to see is still going. Now my next stop was supposed to be LA, but I ran out of money in Hawaii and I had to change my flight to just get me straight home. Do you remember those days when you could just ring the number on the back of your paper ticket and then change your plans? I was in LA for about 4 hours and I still haven't been back. And when I got home, I always knew I wanted to go travelling again, and now I am. These photos were taken in the 90s before digital cameras were really a thing, so they were taken on film using an old Canon camera. Now if you're my age, you'll remember that film was expensive and you had 36 photos per roll, and inevitably when you got home you had a couple of pictures left, which you might take a photo of the cat or the dog or something like that. Well, I decided not to tell my parents when I was coming home, and I just took a photo of them when they saw me for the first time. My dad is going to be mortified that there's a loaf of Tesco value bread on the table, and my dear old mum was very shocked, and she sat there with my stepdad Roy. I've been on a few trips this year and I've got some more planned. The big trip that I haven't made a video about this year was to Barbados, and I ticked off a few bucket list items on that trip, and one of them was flying first class both ways, and this was proper first class too. And my next trip is in a week or so. I'm flying to Qatar in business to Bali. I was going to fly into Bangkok and that was sort of the plan, but the Bali flight had Q suites and I just couldn't pass that up. And then I'm going to go on to Melbourne. I'm going to visit my family there. Plans for next year, I'll be requalifying for Gold in July and August, and I might be flying first class on Emirates if I can get enough Amex points. And I also have a little plot bubbling on the back burner that I might fly to South Korea on Finnair using Avios. So although I've little doubt that if you've watched this far into the video, you're already going to be a subscriber, but if you're not, then do please subscribe and click the bell and you'll get a notification when all of these videos get released. So a bit more about me then. I was asked if I'd always been a solo traveller. Well, I've just described a backpacking trip from my early 20s, and although I was travelling solo on that trip, a friend of mine actually met me off the plane, and I've always felt like I've had a group of friends throughout that trip. And once I got back, it wasn't long after that trip that I settled down into married life, and I was very happy with that, but unfortunately I did become a solo traveller again in January 2022 when we separated. Which brings me to another question that I've been asked a couple of times in sort of slightly different ways, and that's sort of about timelines, or as they put it, isn't this my second grey gap year? Well, in February, March and April last year, I just put myself into a self-imposed lockdown. I was no fun to be around. I don't know what I'd have done if I'd had to go into work every day. But then in May, I decided enough was enough and I was going to get out and do something. And I had some theatre tickets from before lockdown, so I went to London to see To Kill a Mockingbird. And that was actually my first solo trip. The car broke down on the way. Although I did manage to get there, I spent the entire time feeling very self-conscious, and I generally didn't really enjoy the experience. On the way home, I started to feel unwell and I came down with terrible food poisoning. I was very ill for about a week. But as you'll see from the videos that I made, I booked travel from July and I did a lot of firsts that year. I was eating in a restaurant alone and going to the cricket alone for the first time. I went to the theatre alone for the first time, and I really grew in confidence as the year went on. So I have been travelling for over a year, but I'll stick with Grey Gap Year for just as many years as I'm able. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the comments, because this might be a one-time deal. I guess we'll just see how it goes and we'll see what kind of questions I get. I may live to regret this. And I have to close the same way I began, with heartfelt thanks to everyone who supported the channel with your likes, your comments and your subscriptions. Everything has happened a lot quicker than I could have ever imagined, and it's all because of you. So thank you very much. It is very much appreciated. And thank you for joining me on my Grey Gap Year.